Hey guys, this right here is Jangaloimp, and I'm going to be doing a source engine particle tutorial today. So let's get started. First, what we need to do to get to the actual particle editor, you've got to go to Tools, click Particle Editor, and then first off you'll see on the side where the purple screen is, that's our engine viewport. If you had a map or something open, this right here is where the map would show up. I'll talk about the interface more as we go on. So first, let's go to File, click on New, and that'll create a new particle system for us. Right now it's untitled, so if you want to save it, we can save it as anything we want. So let's go to File, Save, and then just name it Fire 1. Now that our particle system is saved, I'm going to show you what exactly we're going to be making today. So I'm going to go open a fire particle that I've previously made, and then we're going to replicate it. First, I'm going to go over what the particle interface is. At the top, you've got your particle system definitions, which is basically the names of your particles and the parents and the children particles. Like this right here is a parent, and the one that has a 1 after it is a child, which is simply a piece of that particle. But for now, this right here is the particle system we're going to be making, and first off, let's make this a little bit easier to view. To make this easier to view, let's drag the preview panel window over and then drag it over the purple, and this right here basically allows us to see the particle in much greater detail. If you want to rotate around the particle, you hold the left mouse button and then drag. To zoom in, you just hold the right mouse button and drag. And now that you've seen the particle, let's get started. So first off, we're going to go to Create. We're going to name the particle Tutorial Fire 1. And let's get started on this. So first, we want to find the material, and we're going to be using the burning character material, which is provided by Valve. So to get to the material viewer, all you've got to do is go to the material, click the 3 dots, and then you type fire in the filter, and then scroll down until you can find particle / fire burning character / fire burning character. And here you can see this right here is all the sequences that this fire particle provides. Generally each row is its own sequence. So this right here is sequence 0, sequence 1, 2, 3, and so on. Now we're going to go to the render tab, and this is where we're going to show off our renderers. First, we've got render animated sprites. If we look at render animated sprites, we can see that this right here is the one that we want to be using. Render rope is basically like electricity or some other effect that would require a stringy look. I do not know what render screen velocity rotate is. I've never used it. It's new in this editor. I've never seen it before. And then render sprite trail is something you want to use for like sparks or debris that would be stretched out. For now, we're just going to use render animated sprites. So click open on that, and then since we've got it open, we're just going to go ahead and change the animation rate to 1.1. Basically what this allows is it allows the sequence to render however fast you want it to render. Next, we're going to go to operator. We're going to add an alpha fade in decay, an alpha fade in random, alpha fade out random, lifespan decay, movement basic, and then radius random. Radius scale, sorry. Whoops. So that's the radius scale, alpha fade in decay, alpha fade in random, alpha fade out random, lifespan decay, movement basic. Now we're going to go to our initializers tab. Here we're going to be adding an alpha random. We're going to add color random, lifetime random, position within a sphere random, and then position modify offset random. We want to also add rotation random and then sequence random. Now let's go to our emitter. Here we have emit continuously, which this emits a particle for the duration that you want it to. If the duration is 0, it emits infinitely. If you use emit instantaneously, then it'll just emit the particles instantly for whatever number that you want to emit. For this, we're just going to use emit continuously, and we want to use the start fade in. We're going to make that 0, and then we're going to make the end fade in 5, and this will make sure that the particles build up as if the fire is growing. We want to make the emission rate 35, and then that's all we've got to do for this. If you wanted to change the emission duration, you could do that, and if you made it, let's say 1, then the particles would only emit for 1 second. You might be wondering why there's no particles showing up over here. The reason for that is we haven't set a lifetime for the particles yet, but for now, we don't need to. Right now I'm just scaling my view up because for some reason it went down. Okay, so let's go to our initializer tab, and let's change the lifetime max to 1, and let's change the lifetime min to 0.9. And currently, since we have a rotation, the fire particles are rotated into like a circle, and this isn't what we want. So let's go to our rotation random. Let's change rotation offset max to 15, and the other to -15. This basically allows that our particles can be rotated just a little bit to add slight variation. You can see at the bottom of the frame where the particles are rotating just a little bit. Right now we're going to go to our alpha minimum, and we're going to make this minimum 128 and alpha max of 160. This will make sure that our particles are a little bit translucent and not as bright. For color random, we're just going to kind of eyeball what we feel is correct for this. So if you click color 1, click the square, and then it'll give you a color picker. All you've got to do is just drag these little bars to the general color you want, and then the closer to white it is, the closer to the normal color it is. Well, the preset color that's baked into the texture. For me, generally, I do color 1, a darker color, and then I do color 2, a little bit closer to white, which gives me a nice mix of dark and light. Right now you might be thinking, well, this doesn't quite look like a particle. Well, it looks like a particle, but it doesn't look as if it's moving or like fire, really. This is because we don't have any movement in the particle. So let's go to the operators, And here's where Movement Basic comes in. Movement Basic basically provides a steady gravity for any particle. For this purpose, we're going to be using 300 on 0, 0, 300, which is X, Y, Z. The Z goes up, which is the blue line. So we're going to make that gravity 300, but that's far too much. You can see that the fire is tapering off. You can see that the value of 300 is a little bit too far. And because of that, we're going to change the drag to 0.05. Just note, if you're using drag, the drag, anything over 0.1 gives a lot. As in, like, the value is, I don't know how to put it, but I'll just show you. It slows the particle down a lot is what I'm saying. So this right here is kind of good for a smaller particle, but we're not going to be doing this. Alright, so now that we've got a fairly fast fire, we need to go to our radius scale since we're in this operators tab. Radius scale basically says what scale from the radius random do you want the particle to start at. For this purpose, we want it to start at 0.05. Sorry, I mean 0.5, which means half what it normally starts at. And then the end scale, we want to do, let's just do 1.2. So we want it to be about 20% bigger than what it normally would be at the end. Now, you can see that it's tapering off at the bottom, and then it gets bigger as it goes up. And that's basically what radius scale does. We're going to be going to, oh, I forgot to add my radius. So we need to add a radius random. And here we want the radius minimum to be 8. And then we want the radius max to be 10. Alright, and now we need to be doing a sequence random. Sequence basically picks the lines that was on that material. And you just have to play around to see what each sequence is. But this right here is sequence 1 even though it says 0. But I've already got it written down, so we're going to make a sequence max 2 and leave sequence minimum at 0. As you can see, this changes the particle to where it uses different sequences. Now, let's edit the bias that the particles spawn in. If I pull this over and show render bounding box, you can see the size that the particle is rendering in. If I wanted to change it in like a sphere, all I would have to do is just do distance min on the sphere and make that like 50, and it would spawn within 50 units of the particle. And as you can see, that's exactly what it's doing. You could also use the max to make it spawn only on the outside, but we won't be using position within a sphere. We just need it so that we can offset it. Okay, so now it's spawning back where it was. So we're going to go to position modify offset. We need to go to offset min, and let's make this 128. I'm sorry, let's make it -64. -64, -64 is 0. So this is 64 units in X and Y on the negative, and 0 units high. And then we're going to make it 64, 64, 25, which in turn makes it a total of 128 units and 25 units high. Currently, I think that I wrote the radiuses down wrong, so we're going to change that. Okay, that seems to be a good radius. Change the radius max and the radius min to 50 and 35. And that seems to be fairly perfect. Let's turn this render bounding box off because it's annoying. Currently, we've got a pretty good particle going, and it's actually basically done. But I feel that there's a little bit something else that we could add to it. We could add something on the bottom to give a filling effect, but I want to use something a little bit different. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to force generator, and this right here is basically something that just adds either like a pull towards control point, like if you wanted your particles to spawn in a sphere and then go to the center, you could do a random force, which makes the particles go off randomly. Or you could do twister on axis, which is what we're going to do, and we're going to create something like a fire tornado and just oomph this up a bit. So you've got your twist axis, which means since the 001 is the axis of Z, so it's going to twist around the blue pole. And if we spawn it to be 250, you can see that it spins around. You could play with it. You could play with it a little bit to see how fast it can go without, spinning too far away. Because the faster you make it spin, the farther away it goes from the control point, which is kind of hindering to it depending on how fast you'd want to do it. But this is how you would make a tornado. So since we got this right here and the so-called fire tornado is building up, we need to increase the emission rate because you can see that there's some spots that it's not filling up. So let's just wing it and say 100. So now, after 5 seconds, it'll fade into 100 particles, roughly. And you can see your particle count down here. And then we want to increase the gravity a little bit to pull it up. So let's pull it up to, let's say 600. So there you go. That's a really basic fire tornado, even though that's not initially what it was going to do. But I figured I'd make it cool. And actually, the higher your gravity is, the farther up it'll go. So, if that's not exactly a fire tornado, then I'm not sure what is. And actually, you could increase your twist axis. Sorry, my video cut out for a second. What I was going to say is you could change your movement basic to be 1200. And then we can go back to our force generator and then change this to 1200. And now it looks a lot more like a tornado. I need to go a little bit more into detail of what each of these do, so I'll just sum it up. We went over radius scale. It basically makes a start scale and an end scale. We have alpha fade in decay, which means it allows a particle to fade in and fade out. This right here actually fades it in. I wouldn't really mess with any of the times because it's not necessary. It just fades it in, and then alpha fade out random fades it out. Lifespan decay, it just allows the particle to die. It's something you need. And we've been over movement basic. It just performs basic gravity and drag. Then we've got alpha random, which provides a random alpha. We've got color random, which provides just basic colors. You don't need to worry about temp clamp min and temp clamp max. I would just leave it alone. We've got lifetime random, which allows a random lifetime between the minimum and the maximum. Position within a sphere allows the particles will spawn within a sphere with a distant bias min and distant bias max. If you wanted to be able to rotate a particle, you would change the bias and local system to 1, but you don't really need to do this since it's same all the way around. Speed min and speed max would increase the speed within the sphere. So here's an example. You can see that the particles are going out more wildly because it's trying to go and shoot from where the sphere would be. Basically where the little XYZ indicator is. Alright, position modify offset. We've kind of been through this. Basically what it does is it just allows you to offset within a square. And this just allows to have, a square emitter. But the reason you would want to do position within a sphere and then modify it to be a square is because if you wanted it, like I said, to offset in local space, you could do this. If you went to position within a box and that's all you did, you would not be able to offset it in local space so that you could rotate it in Hammer. Rotation random just rotates it on its, I guess you would say, the x-axis and rotates the texture. Sequence random is basically it just picks the sequences, and then radius random is the random radius of the particle. There's not really anything else that's too unobvious. Things like velocity noise and velocity random, they're fairly, self-explanatory. All you've got to do is just do what you would want the max speed min to be and the max, the minimum and the max, and just play around with it until it looks right. Under operators, this is the more advanced stuff. Like if you wanted to oscillate the radius of the particle, you could oscillate it here. And then, let's see, maybe rotation basic. This right here could help if you were doing something like smoke. Actually, sorry, that's wrong. Rotation spin roll is what you would be looking for. And you would just do spin rate degrees, which I would say maybe 5 or 50. And that just allows your particles to spin. And that does not look good, but if it was smoke, it wouldn't look too bad. And actually, we could just play around and make that smoke. I mean, that's not a really good texture example, but it works to show off what I was saying. So, all in all, that's basically all you need to know to get started with your particle systems. Currently, I'm just deleting all the stuff we don't need. And then I'm going to change the movement basic back to maybe 500. Actually, let's change it back to 300. So that's basically it, guys. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. I hope that it was descriptive enough. And if you guys have any questions, just ask me in the comments and I'll reply to them. I just hope that you thought that this was good. Thanks.